Welcome to Conversations with Barbara. I'm Barbara Kanellopoulos, and with me today are Ted Murphy and Mark Penta, co-creators of a series of books. Now, get this, they write totally weird and super strange stories. And to explain what this is all about, I'll turn to Ted and to Mark. And so tell us and tell our viewers what this is all about. Totally weird and super strange stories.
Well, first of all, Barbara, it's great to be here. I've watched you for years and really excited to be here today. I guess we should start off how we started because it happened in a strange way. We were 7 years old. We've rarely actually, I always like to think that you've almost always been creating something. And it started with us when we were 7. Mark is a summer guy. I don't hold that against him. But he would come down to Falmouth Heights, and my parents and his parents put us together. And at first we didn't get along. We'd play wiffle ball, and he'd strike me out, and I didn't really like him. And then what I found out was we had a common bond, and that is creativity. I love to tell stories. Mark loved to draw the pictures. So at night, instead of playing video games, I would tell a story at your house, right? Mm-hmm. At the picnic table, and Mark would furiously draw the picture to my story. And so back then, that's when the love of creativity happened. And then just a few years ago, we decided, hey, let's do something to get kids creating. And the result is super strange story starters, creative coloring, and far out fun. So. Yes,
I think that's really exciting because the idea is if you want kids to write, they've got to enjoy the activity itself, and so that the weird stories are triggers to the imagination.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep. Exactly.
Did you also continue seeing each other through the years?
I hate to admit this, but he's my best friend.
I see.
Yeah, I would come down on February vacations in the winter and stay with Ted and his family.
I see.
And we'd go to the movies. We'd see, we were always inspired by Steven Spielberg movies, and at night, we'd watch The Twilight Zone.
Okay.
And that stimulated our imaginations,
Yes.
especially to come up with weird ideas and weird stories.
Yeah. And this apparently has been working. You've had lots of experience with young people who are actually doing these. Tell us some of these stories.
Well, what's really exciting, especially locally, we should be on the show and thank the teachers of Falmouth because they've really embraced these books.
Great.
They use them in the schools, and it's exciting. I'll let Mark, because I get to go into the schools a lot, but this happened recently that Mark went in to the classrooms and your experience of seeing the kids.
Yeah, it's some of the teachers, like at East Falmouth Elementary, they'll use them in the classroom. Like they'll take our coloring book here, and or the first book, Super Strange Story Starters, and they'll get the kids to just go crazy, coloring in the pages or using their imaginations to write stories. So I would walk in to the classroom, and it was such a thrill to just see, 30 kids have used our books, have used the prompts in our books to stimulate their imagination.
And speaking of prompts, you have these characters, which is what writing always starts with, a character. Mm-hmm. And let's look at some of those characters that you've drawn.
Sure.
That we can see on the screen.
Mm-hmm. So that's our first book that we came up with.
Yes.
That's called Super Strange Story Starters, and this book started by me drawing a sketch of that fella in the bottom right corner. We called him Nice Guy Gus. He kind of looked like a gangster.
Yes.
And so I drew this picture of this guy with a flower in his lapel and a duck on a leash, and I sent it to Ted, and I said, I don't know what this guy's story is, but it's up to you to write it. So you think up a story for him.
Yeah. So I got it. You basically texted it to me, and I was at Coffee Obsession because I always like to talk about our great coffee houses, Coffee Obsession,
Yes.
Daily Brew, where you go to really create if you're an artist. And I received this sketch, and I'm like, what is this? And in the text, he said, I don't know what this is, but come up with something. And I said, well, he looks like an old school gangster, but I want him to be a nice guy, because he has this duck. And I don't want to give away the story starter, because you got to buy the book. But
Yes.
but I decided, yeah, I'll make him a gangster who actually has got a heart of gold underneath all of it. And then with the story starter, we always leave it, with a cliffhanger. And that's where the kids can now jump in
I see.
and continue writing the stories. And some of the stories they've come up with just that one in general, just crack us up.
Have you found that your young writers pick up on that characterization and build it? Oh, that's
Absolutely.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
That's
yeah,
exciting.
Yeah, and then they'll end their story on a cliffhanger. So we're at East Falmouth School, and a kid will be reading the story, and they end on the cliffhanger, and I'm like, wait, I have to leave. I want to know what's going to happen,
Right, yes,
So
yeah.
it's really a lot of fun.
Yes, I think you're onto something. I would imagine that I'd enjoy doing this kind of thing myself. So I wouldn't be surprised. Oh, and what fun for kids to do this with their parents at home,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
where they can compare notes.
It's so true, because we do have parents who kind of want to take over the story. They're like,
Yeah.
so that's kind of funny as well. And I think, as a kid, my dad was a writer, and we would drive to Canada, and to make the time pass, he would point, to a car going by and saying, okay, that guy's from Ohio. Why is he going to Canada? And all 6 kids in a station wagon would have to come up with the story. And of course, Mark was at our house all the time. So Mark's an extension of our family.
Right.
And just having him as a creative guy drawing the stories,
Yeah.
so much fun.
The two of you have been lifelong storytellers.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is wonderful. And story is everything, isn't it?
It really is, because we, as I mentioned before, having grown up together and spending summers together and going to so many movies.
Yeah.
We grew up in the heyday of the great movies by Spielberg and George Lucas and Rocky and all those movies that we loved as kids. That taught us about story, because we learned, oh wow, we would talk about it afterwards. What made that movie great? What do we love about that movie? And so we would kind of dissect, just through conversation, the story, and it made us understand how to make an emotionally satisfying story. And so we try to bring that to these books.
Yes.
And inspire kids to do the same.
Yeah. And you're noticing that kids are picking up on it and doing quite you must be seeing a range of interest. Some stories perhaps a little weirder than others. But
Yeah. Well, every child is different, and that's the other part of this. I hate to belabor the point that you go into a classroom, but that one story starter, Nice Guy Gus, you're getting 30 different endings.
Yes.
And that teaches them a lot, because they'll hear one kid use more dialogue and say, oh, I got to get more dialogue in, or I got to do more description. So they're teaching one another.
Yes.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Do you suppose we should look at a couple of other characters that you've drawn?
Sure.
And you can talk about how that develops into a story. Oh my, what have we got here?
Well, for this one, this is, we call her Mia Lee, the Fisher Girl. And so I drew this sketch of a girl. It started off where she was just a ballerina. And then I said, well, how do I make this character interesting? She's not just a ballerina. What else about her would make her interesting? And so I drew the tackle box, and then I drew the fishing pole, and suddenly there's more to her than just a ballerina. And I sent that sketch over to Ted, and he created this whole story around it.
Yeah, where I created the story that Mia Lee, like she did ballet, but in her heart, she wanted to be a fisher girl.
Okay.
And
Yes.
I'll leave it at that, because
No, we don't
she
want
goes
to
on
give
an
away.
adventure, we'll
Yes,
say.
yes, and what fun for kids to finish that story.
Yeah.
So when you start sketching, it's with a contradiction in mind.
Yeah, I always think to myself, okay, you can't just have a gangster. There's got to be something about
Yes,
the gangster
yeah.
that makes him stand out as a little bit
Right,
different.
yeah.
You can't just have a ballerina. What is it about her that's sort of the opposite?
Yes, you're right.
And
right.
I try to visually incorporate those things
Yeah.
into the character.
Yeah, and that is so much in even great literature. That's so much the conceit. I think the opposite. Well, what seems to be happening isn't really what's happening.
Exactly.
So I think,
Give that
in a
little
way,
twist.
I'm wondering if this kind of thing doesn't also teach a sort of appreciation of literary stories. I'm sure it does.
Yeah, I would think so, but I never thought of it that way, so that's,
Right.
yeah, that's very interesting.
Yes, good. Certainly that these are the themes in literature. I think there are only a limited number of themes, although modern writing is getting away from just good and evil conflicts. So your books, I don't know what we would call them by way of types. They're just very enjoyable books that can be used to fill in some time while kids are waiting to line up for lunch, or to use at home.
To your point on that, we keep referencing Falmouth, but all over Massachusetts, we hear from teachers who say, yeah, I had like 20 minutes to kill on a Friday because they've done everything. I took the books out and the kids were creating.
Yes.
So not a wasted moment in the classroom.
No, that's good. And now we have some other characters that we should look at here. We had two.
Well, I see on the screen here, they're showing the book cover for our other book, and that's called Creative Coloring and Far Out Fun.
Yes.
And this one is for slightly younger kids, and it's basically a coloring and activity book. So there are still stories in it that Ted came up with, but we just did the whole thing visually so that kids could color in the pictures.
Yes, yes.
So like, for example, this picture here, we got this octopus attacking what looks like an undersea school adventure. And we used the name of, Ted used the name of one of his teacher friends, Mrs. Meserve. And so we incorporated that story into this scene. And we just thought it would be a fun picture for kids to color in.
Right.
Because when we created our first book and self-published that, we did a few book signings and we noticed that entire families would show up at the book signing. So there were not only the kids that were sort of like, the older elementary age for that creative writing book, but then their younger siblings would show up. And when I said to Ted, we should make a coloring book for them too.
Yeah.
And so that's the purpose of this one here.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, so that you're not leaving any of the children out. They're doing things
Exactly.
together.
They're
Right.
starting at an even younger age.
And it was fun for us too because we incorporated in the pages, I know it's maybe hard to see in the picture, but in every corner there's a little Mark and a little Ted. So it sort of depicts us as when we were kids.
Right.
And we're giving instructions to our readers.
Yeah, and I'm dressed with a Boston College hat in all those drawings. That's why I wear this. It's kind of my
He's been wearing that hat since we were
Ron Howard trademark.
7.
Yeah, that sort of, it's a detail, but really significant because the student, the pupil who's reading this is aware that this is created too by real people.
Exactly.
right.
Just
Yeah.
two regular guys.
Two regular
Yeah.
guys who have
And-
created all of this rather than thinking that the author is some distant individual.
Well, to your thought on that, just the other day I was in Stop and Shop and this little kid goes, hey, I think that's T.M. Murphy, the guy from, because I was wearing
Yeah.
my BC hat.
Yeah.
And what a thrill that is when,
Yes, of
when
course.
it's what an ego boost when the kids are like, yeah, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And again, I grew up, my dad was an author, and he would do the book signings at the Market Bookshop,
Yes, yes.
way back in the day. And I thought it was the coolest thing that people wanted my dad's autograph.
Yeah, right.
I didn't quite get it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I wanted his autograph.
Yeah, you did. But now we're doing that, and we're hopefully there's going to be a next generation of little Marks and little Teds.
Yes.
Creating.
We might find that one of many of them may even decide to go into writing.
That'd
And
be-
Yeah.
particularly now where there's so many different genres. There's creative nonfiction, there's a narrative nonfiction. There's been quite an explosion of writing styles, which is, I think, a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Something for everyone.
Yes.
Yes.
We always say when we visit classrooms to the kids that we were not the best students ourselves when we were younger. I wasn't good at math, Ted wasn't good at science.
And math.
But we had our skills, we had our things that we like to do. I like to draw, he liked to write. And so we encourage them to follow their passion, whatever it is that they enjoy,
Right.
to pursue that. Yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, but one of the things I've always wondered about is why do we have some students who excel in the verbal arts and yet others not? And I like to think maybe that this is a challenge to educators. We sort of wear as a badge of honor, oh, I'm not good at numbers. I wonder if there could be something like this that would encourage children to do math and to enjoy it, to make it fun. Certainly, what do you think? Is this possible? Because there's no way that we should want education or children to lose out in those early years when numbers can become very familiar to them, where they can learn to quantify without necessarily needing a calculator.
Mm.
I can only speak from my experience with math and math teachers. I wasn't fortunate to have ones who made it fun. I think that's the biggest part at the beginning. You have to make it fun. If they had made it fun, who knows? I would be into math. But you also mentioned something that I totally agree, and I wish I didn't jump on as a young person. Like, I can't do math. That's how I looked at it. So then I didn't even try.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And to the badge of honor thing I get it, because I always say I can't do math.
Yeah.
Where I didn't try, and but yeah, I don't know if we could write the book on getting kids to do math
It
stuff.
would be kind of challenging.
but
Maybe
I
there's
think
some mathematician out there who can say, sure,
Yeah,
possible.
hopefully we'll inspire them.
Yeah.
But what we can say is, the kid who's great at math, who's been struggling on the verbal side,
yes.
is now into these, and they might get out of that mindset that I had about math.
Yes.
I think, too, there are so many different characters in our book. They're all so different, because we wanted to try to appeal to as many type of personalities as we could. And so I think that we think a lot of different types of kids will even identify with some of the characters in our books. So hopefully, we're trying to include all kinds of people.
Try, in one of your other books, a character who's a mathematician.
Oh, there you
Good
go.
idea.
Boom.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, you're not going to want 10%.
No, no. And so just make that character attractive in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great idea.
Right.
That's a great idea.
What are your plans for? You have. Let's talk about what books you have out now. These two.
These two, and there's going to be a third one on the way, coming out at the end of April in 2023. So we just we finished that book last summer, and we literally just this afternoon corrected the proofs from our publisher.
I see.
And here it is on the screen.
And this is actually
Oh,
an exclusive for you, Barbara. We just got the cover. Mark obviously did the cover, but everything's done that way, and it's unusual objects in fantastic places.
That's wonderful. So I can say to viewers, you saw it here.
You saw it first,
here
yeah.
first.
Yeah.
FCTV.
Yeah. And so in that book, Mark would send me an unusual object in a fantastic place, like a gumball machine in front of the pyramids. So then I would have to come up. Yeah, sometimes it's not the most fun because I'm like, Mark, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
And he will say, well, you get a couple of days, think of something. But that's what's been actually really enjoyable is he challenges me and vice versa.
Yep.
I'll send him an object. I think, what was it, the bobsled park?
Yeah.
What was that?
Ted sent me a story about these kids that like to skateboard at on an old bobsled was a track
Yeah.
that was somehow in the woods.
Well, it was abandoned from the Olympics.
It was an
'cause I'd
old
seen
abandoned
something.
bobsled track.
Yeah, I was like, oh.
And I thought, what am I going to do with that? I don't even know what a bobsled track looks like. But I looked one up on Google and I created the sketch. And Ted had this story about these two kids that go skateboarding, and as they're skateboarding along this old bobsled track, one of them bumps into something and flips in the air and lands on this mysterious suitcase that's laying there. And so she goes over to open the suitcase, and that's the cliffhanger. Now kids have to decide what's going to happen next.
I have to tell you, that's irresistible. I would want to say, oh, the suitcase. Yes, I wouldn't be surprised if you had parents who are doing this on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because when I first, so these started off as self-published books. This was about 5 or 6 years ago. And then we got a publisher, West Margin Press, who wanted to take them nationwide.
Yeah.
So when we had them self-published, I was teaching some adult students, and the Super Strange Story Starters, there's one where Edna Gladstone bakes a pie, and it's a special pie, and she puts in an ingredient, and she becomes world famous. Well, one of the older students, this woman, she wrote like a 10-page story on Edna Gladstone.
Really?
And it was fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, this is just wonderful. I'm so enthusiastic about this, and I hope that you'll continue doing this and probably inventing all kinds of other stories for children. And the great thing is that you're getting young people to write so that they're going to be familiar with putting sentences together.
exactly.
And
Thank you.
And you're saying this has been quite successful in schools.
Absolutely, yes,
Yep.
yes.
Good.
Schools and even, I teach the Just Write It class at Falmouth Heights, if I can give a plug there. So I use it myself. You know, when I'm not using my other prompts, I'm like, wait, I created a book here. Guys,
Right.
Yep.
but the fun part of that class is we give them prompts we're working on that haven't been published. So we get firsthand back and forth where kids, you know, not everything we do is great. So they're like, yeah, Mr. Murphy, this
Okay.
one's not working.
All right.
And so I put that in the B-side list, I
Yes.
guess.
Great.
And so yeah.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being here and for sharing these with us. And I wish you well and look forward to your future creations.
Thank you, Barbara.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And viewers, thank you so much for joining us. We'll look forward to seeing you again next time on Conversations with Barbara.